What's up, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series. I'm Darkside Phil, and today we're going to talk about a game that seems to have received a lot of critical acclaim. It was an interesting reboot of a series that a lot of people have said over the past maybe 5 or so years has really gone astray. And a unique game because it is a very subject-centric game, meaning that it can't really be defined as a certain genre. It's not a fighting game, it's not really a simulation game. What is it, you know? And really when it comes down to it, you have to say it's a pro wrestling game because it's kind of an interesting combination of things. And the game we're talking about is WWE 12. Now, it is not WWE 12 as in this is the 12th installment, it's WWE 12 as in 2012, okay? And what this is the newest installment of what was previously called SmackDown vs. Raw, and before that was actually just called SmackDown with some different, like, secondary titles to it. So, why is it called WWE 12? What's the deal? Basically, this year THQ announced that this was going to be a reboot of the WWE wrestling franchise of games, that they were going to be taking it a little bit more seriously. It was going to be pretty much a hardcore wrestling simulator, pro wrestling simulator, and that it would have a whole bunch of new things added to it. It was really going to be a good game. And a lot of people were skeptical. They're like, you know, last time you changed the name of your series from SmackDown to SmackDown vs. Raw, we actually feel that it kind of dropped a little bit in quality. And every year they've been coming out with a SmackDown vs. Raw game with really not many new features. It was mostly just like roster changes and such. And so a lot of people kind of groaned when this game was announced. Well, today we're going to talk about the different game modes in WWE 12. We're going to talk about the things I think that were done right, the things that I think were done wrong, who I think this will definitely be a fun game for, and then I'm going to rate the game. So, WWE 12 has several different modes. The primary mode of the game that's considered like the campaign mode, what you would call a campaign mode or story mode in any other game, is actually called Road to WrestleMania. And this mode attempts to basically give you 3 different storylines that were written by the writers of this game, you know, who work for THQ, similar to storylines that you would see on, like, an actual WWE wrestling program. So you start out with the villain storyline, which stars Sheamus, who eventually teams up with a bunch of European wrestlers to form a stable called the United Kingdom, and it follows the plight and the adventures of basically this group of wrestlers from week to week, simulating what matches they would have on each Raw, each SmackDown, if they were on each other show, and each pay-per-view, going through showing them how some of them win titles, and eventually how they win all the titles in WWE, which is pretty crazy. I know it sounds really off the wall and nutty. A lot of the storylines in the Road to WrestleMania road are pretty far-fetched, including some insane returns of things that you would never believe would ever happen. The second storyline is called the Outsider storyline and mainly features Triple H. And then the final storyline is called the Hero storyline, where you actually create your own wrestler. And that guy basically tries to get to the top during this storyline. So each storyline itself consists of certain things. Your week-to-week happenings, usually a promo or whatever, just as if you were watching a WWE wrestling show, your guys might come out and cut a promo on whatever's going on that particular week in wrestling or with their characters. And then usually you simulate either a match or a backstage fight segment where maybe you're in like the dressing room or in the hallway in the back of the building and you have to knock some people out who are trying to attack you or something like that. And then there'll be pay-per-view matches where you'll actually participate and try to win titles and such and things like that. So that's pretty much what the whole deal with Road to WrestleMania is. It's a story mode, simulating wrestling storylines. You'll have some matches, you'll have some backstage brawls, and you'll have some promos and such. So it is pretty interesting. And interestingly enough, it is very long. The villain storyline was just over 3 hours, the Outsider storyline was just under 3 hours, and the Hero storyline was over 4 hours long. So we're talking, you're probably going to get probably around 10 hours of gameplay just out of the Road to WrestleMania mode in WWE 12, which is pretty interesting. Other game modes include WWE Universe mode, which is really kind of like the season simulation mode in any other sports game. So you're going to simulate an entire year of WWE. You actually get to determine who has all the titles in WWE. You can create your own tag teams. You can create your own wrestlers to put into this mode. You can actually create your own pay-per-view events, your own TV shows, your own arenas, all the stuff you can create to put into WWE Universe mode. Fully customizable, pretty nuts the amount of detail that they go into with the customizations, including are you a face or a heel, who are your teammates, or who are you friendly with, who are you really a rival with. And all this stuff is so detailed it actually goes into the simulations of the season per se. And you can simulate regular matches, you can simulate pay-per-view matches, all this kind of stuff, and you can even set up the schedule of when you want your shows to be during the year. So it is pretty damn interesting and pretty detailed for a mode. Now they've had modes like this before, but actually it used to have this kind of mode and then Road to WrestleMania mode were almost the same, where you would simulate weeks of the year, but you would play your matches, but then you'd have story intertwined with it. So they really focused on separating the two, having a full simulation mode and a full kind of story mode separate from each other so they don't, interfere with each other. And I think this is one of the coolest features of the game is the amount of customization you can do in the simulation mode. In fact, John Rambo and I, after taking a look at it, have decided that coming up, some of our gameplay that we'll do together on the weekends is we're going to probably start simulating shows and pay-per-views in WWE 12 with our own characters that we'll probably create, plus with all the characters who are in the games. Maybe we'll just mess around and bring back some old wrestlers who you haven't seen in quite a long time, and just do some crazy shenanigans with WWE 12. And the other cool thing is you can actually use this game to simulate matches that are actually going to happen. So when TLC is finally announced, the next pay-per-view for WWE, and they announce all their matches, we can actually simulate those matches in WWE 12 and see what happens, which I think is pretty damn cool. You've also got your standard just exhibition mode, where you can set up any kind of match you want. Now, it is to be said for the game, it pretty much has every single match in WWE history. You've got, standard match, tag match, triple threat, fatal four-way, six-man elimination, custom match, and then different other styles of matches. So you have your regular match, extreme rules match, tables, ladders, and chairs match, just the tables match, just the chairs match, just a ladder match, steel cage match, Hell in a Cell match, elimination chamber match, Inferno match, which I'm surprised they even put that one in there, an Inferno match, tornado tag match. Anything you can think of is pretty much in this game, which is pretty crazy that they included that much content and that many adjustments to the matches, and I'm really happy that they did that. So those are the basic game modes. There is another game mode that's supposed to be online gameplay, and I'm going to speak very candidly about that right now, because I'm going to be honest with everyone, I'm pretty disappointed with THQ. Now, I am reviewing this game on the Monday after the game was released, so it's not even a full week since this game has been released, and I went to play the game online, and it says the THQ servers are not available. So actually I started checking with some fans. Apparently the servers have been down for the whole week. Like, after the first day this game was released, they crashed and have not been enabled since then. So you're telling me everyone bought this game, and what's the first thing you do when you buy a wrestling game? Do you rush online? No. You're going to check out the features. You're going to create your own wrestler. You're going to mess around with the simulation mode. You're probably going to check out the campaign mode. So by the time everyone finally gets around to playing the online play, it doesn't fucking work. And that's a huge detriment to the game. I'm surprised, and I'm actually really angry at THQ, because I've played other wrestling games from THQ. I played some of the SmackDown vs. Raws. I played All Stars from earlier this year, and those games didn't have that problem. So what went wrong with WWE 12 that the online play is completely fucked right now? I'm not sure, but that is a huge detriment, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay itself and what to expect from the combat and some of the other aspects of the game as well. So, the actual in-ring combat at WWE 12, in my opinion, it's an interesting take that they took here, because it seems to be an amalgamation of some different things, like the SmackDown vs. Raw controls versus maybe a more relaxed control scheme. It was easy for me to jump into WWE 12 and learn most of the basic controls, okay? Because I've already played the SmackDown vs. Raw series. I played some of the SmackDown games on PlayStation 2, So I was used to these standard controls. It's pretty much almost the same. You've got your regular strikes, your heavy strikes, your stun kick. You've got a regular grapple that can be turned into several different grapple moves. From a regular grapple, you can actually transition into other holds like a headlock, a waist lock, things like that. You can whip your opponent either into the ropes or into the corner. Obviously, in the corner, you have a whole new repertoire of corner moves. You could put the guy up on the top rope, or you could do all kinds of things like that. You can jump off the turnbuckle. You've got countering. And countering is done with the right trigger. And what you basically do is you wait for someone to either grab you, just when they're just about to grab you or just about to strike you. You press right trigger and you're able to counter and reverse that move. And it really can be interesting if later on in a match someone's trying to do a finish or whatever and you're able to counter it. It really could turn the tide of a match, which is pretty neat. Some new additions for WWE 12. A targeting mode where basically when you grapple someone, you can target a certain area of the body. And I really like this premise because a lot of the times pro wrestlers like to tell a story during a match. So, for example, if Alberto Del Rio is wrestling, his actual special finishing maneuver is a submission move where he puts you in an arm bar. So what you would want to do if you're playing with Alberto Del Rio is probably work the arms for most of the match. You're telling the story. I worked the arm was weak, I was able to submit him with my finishing maneuver. So you're able to, for the very first time, you're able to specifically target those particular limbs, either left arm, right arm, the head, or the legs during a match, which is pretty neat. And this also adds different effects. So, for example, if you keep targeting the head, the chances are that your opponent will end up groggy more often than before. If you target the arms, it's harder for them to escape submission holds. You target the legs, something else happens. So each targeted limb, the weaker that it gets, actually affects the performance of the person you're fighting, and that's really neat. I like that. Another cool feature was the comeback feature, which seems a little bit weird. I couldn't tell exactly when you could do it. I think maybe if you already had a finisher move stored up, that you could actually do a comeback. But basically, let's say someone hits a finisher on you. Well, you have the ability, I believe, if you have your own finisher stored, to come back, which means you kind of like get a second win. You jump up and you go into this comeback mode, which is almost like a quick time event. If you hit the opponent, they fall down, and a lot of times this happens in wrestling. If someone is coming back, they can just get a string of attacks, and it seems like the guy on the other end can't really stop whatever's happening. That could happen in this game. And similarly to that, if it's a tag match, they have what's called a hot tag, where if you've been getting beaten up the entire match, you can get a hot tag to your partner, and he comes in, he gets a guaranteed string of attacks through a series of quick time button presses on your opponent, and it just adds to the gameplay of the game. In my opinion, the gameplay of WWE 12 is some of the best wrestling gameplay I've ever played for the modern era. I don't think that a game like this can be really fairly compared to a game like, let's say, the classics, like, what was it, WWE No Mercy, or WCW versus NWO, because those games were a different era, and they had stringed grapples and things, and they were really groundbreaking for the time. I think that this game, what it's trying to do is take the best things out of all the previous WWE games and slap them together into one package. So I really think that that the controls of WWE 12 in-ring combat are really good, okay? That being said, the other kind of combat that takes place during the game, primarily during the Road to WrestleMania mode, it really won't happen much outside of that, is the backstage combat. And the backstage combat is asinine, stupid, and a complete waste of time. What these backstage segments are in the Road to WrestleMania mode is someone's trying to jump you, basically. Sometimes it's multiple people. And what you end up having to do is damage them all to a certain point where they're ready to be finished, per se. And when they're ready to be finished, a icon will appear above their head. You press that button, whatever the icon is, and you'll automatically grab that guy and throw him somewhere backstage. Maybe he'll hit the steel door. Maybe he'll, hunch over a giant box or something. And then once they're there, you walk up, you press it again, and you do something stupid that ends the fight. So you might put their head in the door and close the door on their face. You might smash their head into the case that they're leaning over, and then you win. And it's like, you win, but it wasn't a match, so what did you really win? It's very odd. And sometimes these backstage segments, the controls can be awful. Like, for whatever reason, it seemed like during these segments it was very hard to counter other people's attacks, which made it very difficult in segments where I was fighting 2 to 3 people to be countering everything they were doing and actually be successful. And it made me actually replay certain things over and over and over until I finally lucked out and got past those stupid backstage segments. So I think those are really dumb. Going along with that, the gameplay of the in-ring stuff during the Road to WrestleMania story mode also can be a little flaky because there's two different types of gameplay. There's gameplay that's actually simulating a match, which is pretty much everything you do outside of Road to WrestleMania mode is like that. And sometimes they want you to do that, but sometimes the game doesn't want you to do that in WrestleMania mode. Sometimes it tells you at the bottom of the screen what your goal is. So it might say, oh, weaken your opponent, and that's it. So you beat the crap out of him, and all of a sudden an icon appears above his head. You press that button, and all of a sudden you'll go into a cutscene. And that cutscene will explain what's going on with the story, and so you basically won that match. Even though technically you never completed the match, you never pinned the guy, the cutscene will determine what's going to happen next. And I think one of the most annoying parts of the game where that happens is the very final fight in the story mode, which I won't spoil, but it has multiple levels where you're supposed to weaken a certain character, and then the icon will appear and you can press the button. The problem is, there's like other people involved in the match, and they keep getting involved, and if they screw it up, then you have to start the match over. And it's really annoying that the game does that, and multiple levels of having to get to this point where there's an icon above this guy's head, and you can try to press the button to advance to the next stage of the fight. I really think that the final fight in the game should have been a legitimate match, not this weird goal to do basically beat the crap out of someone so that an icon appears and then you can move on to the next part of the match. I thought that was really weird. So, what do I really think about WWE 12, okay? First of all, as a wrestling fan, obviously I love it. I mean, I have to say this is not opinion, this is fact. The production values of WWE 12 are off the charts. The characters, for the most part, are the most realistic they've ever looked, and actually look very similar to the people who they're supposed to be representing. A lot of the times in these games, you say, oh, here comes whoever it is, Randy Orton, he comes out, it doesn't look anything like Randy Orton. You're like, what the fuck? They couldn't spend any more time on the character model to make these guys look like the guy he's supposed to be representing. I have to say about 75 to 80% of the people look pretty much dead on like the people they're supposed to represent. There are the handful of people who still really oddly don't look right, which I don't understand how this day and age they still can't get it right. But I know that sounds kind of funny, but it is true. The amount of wrestlers they put into the game. There's over 30 wrestlers in this game, and a lot of unlockable wrestlers, a lot of classic legends like Axe and Smash of Demolition, Hawk and Animal of Legion of Doom. Characters that I never thought would be in the game. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Arn Anderson, Vader, of all people, are all unlockable characters, and it's really, it blows you away when you're playing the game. You're like, wow, they fucking really put a lot of guys in this game, and it's pretty cool, because they are all kind of represented very genuinely. Their movesets that they gave them are their real movesets from when they were wrestling, and it really is cool to have that amount of content in the game. The ring entrances are outstanding. The ring entrances are true to form, pretty much for the most part, of what the real ring entrances are for these wrestlers. And also, the music. Like, one thing I want to really say about this game is they put a lot of effort into making sure that at least up to, say, maybe a month or two ago, everything in the game was accurate to what was going on the WWE programming on TV. So you're going to have CM Punk's new entrance, new Titantron, and his new theme in this game. You're going to have Dolph Ziggler's new theme in this game up to a couple weeks ago, because just a couple weeks ago they again changed his theme a little bit more. But it's really cool that they put that amount of effort into it, that basically when the game went gold, everything was pretty accurate. Now, still, there's the oddball thing here and there. There's wrestlers in this game that aren't even employed with the company anymore, like Chavo Guerrero, Vladimir Kozlov, Michelle McCool, Layla. And I guess they said, well, you know, when we started development on the game, they were with the company. We put all this effort into it to have them in the game. We might as well include them in the game, not put them in the game after putting all that effort into it. So I can understand why they left some of those guys in the game, even though they're no longer employed with the WWE. That makes sense. And also, the other thing that's a little weird is when you initially go into the WWE Universe mode, you're going to see that some of the wrestlers that have the title in that mode that don't really have the title anymore. Like Del Rio was still WWE Champion. Well, obviously CM Punk just won the title from him, so no, that wasn't programmed into the game yet. For whatever reason, I think Michelle McCool was the women's or the Divas champion, and she is not even with the company anymore, so obviously that's wrong. So you're going to want to definitely go in there and swap around the titles and such if you really want to make this game a simulation. And by the way, the game has pretty much every legacy title ever from WWE, including the $1 Million belt, the ECW belts, the Hardcore Championship, the WCW title. All these belts from over the years are included in the game, which is really neat if you want to mess around with the belt system in the game and give different people different titles. I really like that feature. So yeah, the production value is sky high. Characters look great. Music is great because it includes all the latest themes that they could up to when the game went gold. The Titantrons are there. I mean, everything is spot on. They really put a lot of effort into this game. So, WWE 12. What kind of people will I think will like this? First of all, if you are a fan of WWE, you will love this game. You will be playing it for hours on end. First going through the campaign mode, the story mode, then simulating your own season, putting all the titles, creating your own tag teams, doing all your own stuff. If that's the kind of stuff you're into, this is your game. If you want to do crazy 4-player matches with your friends, this is your game, including the World Rumble, all the gimmick matches of the year. They have all that in WWE 12. Really neat that they included all that content. If you're a fan of wrestling, but you're not necessarily a hardcore fan of WWE, and maybe you've played some of the previous games like SmackDown vs. Raw, and you got it turned off over the years, I would say this is a good re-entry point. I think they've significantly improved the game to the point where you will probably be pleasantly surprised at what they've done with WWE 12, okay? Is this the best wrestling game of all time? No, absolutely not. But I would have to say this actually is the best game of the modern generation of pro wrestling games. It blows away all the previous SmackDown vs. Raw games, the TNA bullshit games that have come out, even WWE All-Stars from earlier this year. This is a far better game than those games, both combat-wise and production-wise. In my opinion, it's a must-buy if you like these kind of games. However, that being said, there are some negatives, including the fact that the online play doesn't fucking work right now, and who knows when it's going to go up. It's been down for a week now since the game was released. The fact that there is just horribly broken gameplay when it comes to these backstage segments of the campaign mode, and they're really annoying, the most annoying thing in the game in my opinion. And the one other negative that I do want to say about the game that I haven't brought up yet, they put the counter button as right trigger. And let's use our heads here. When you're pressing a trigger on this controller, the trigger is the slowest reactionary button on this controller, because unlike this where it's an instant press on a shoulder or an instant press on any face button, you have to depress the trigger before it'll react. So there is a momentary reaction and delay in pressing a trigger. Why the fuck they make you press that as the quick reactionary move to counter stuff is beyond me. They had enough buttons where they could have made it a bumper or they could have made it a face button, and I really feel they should have done that, and that's the one flub that they did with the control scheme of this game. You will find in the game you will start to get tired and you will start to miss your counters after an extended match or playing for a while, and you'll get really frustrated like I did when I couldn't get my counters to come out properly. So overall, how do I rate WWE 12? Well, unfortunately, I can't really give it a full review because the online play doesn't fucking work. So if the online play worked, maybe I could really say, okay, here's the total package. Because the online play doesn't work, I'm not going to delay my review. I have to give a review of the game. There's other stuff I need to get to. So I'm going to give WWE 12 a 7.75 out of 10, meaning much better than the previous installments of WWE games like this. I would probably give in the past couple SmackDown vs. Raw games like a 5. Because they were so generic, so just washed out, had problems, definitely didn't have the production values of this game, etc. I was thinking about giving this game an 8, maybe even an 8.5 at times, but I can't when the online play doesn't work. They gave it trigger as a counter button, which I think is a stupid move, and there are really annoying, buggy parts of the story campaign. So, 7.75 for WWE 12. If the online play ever works, I might try it, but I can't guarantee it because I'll be busy with other stuff. And unfortunately, I would love to give an addendum to my score if I ever do get to play it, so I'll let you know. But as of now, 7.75 for WWE 12. It's a great wrestling game. It's not an outstanding Game of the Year contender. It's not the best wrestling game of all time. But in my opinion, it is a must-buy if you are a WWE fan. Alright, so it's been the Hateful Truth for WWE 12. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative as always. And I will see you guys later for the next installment. Thanks a lot.